Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Peter the Booklover, and this is Book Talk. This is where I talk about the books I recently read. This is episode 24, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about a book by John Steinbeck. This is Travels with Charley in Search of America. Let's talk about this book. Hello again. I am Peter the Booklover. I like to read a lot of books. I like to collect a lot of books, and I also like to talk about the books that I read. I also like to talk about the movies that I watch, so I have a YouTube channel talking about books and movies. And I really enjoy doing it. Hopefully you will too. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about a book by John Steinbeck called Travels with Charley in Search of America. And I'm going to enjoy talking about it. But before I get into the book, I really want to thank my audience for being here. I want you to know that I really appreciate that you're giving me your time. It means a lot to me. So I want to thank you. Thank you. So let's get into this. This is a book written by John Steinbeck. This came out in 1962. Now, John Steinbeck is a person that I've read other books by. He wrote Of Mice and Men, and that is a fantastic book. I really love that book a lot. He also wrote East of Eden, which is another incredible book. As a matter of fact, that book is amazing. I really love that book. He wrote a book called The Pearl that I really enjoyed. He also wrote a book called The Red Pony that I really enjoyed. And he also wrote Grapes of Wrath, which was another book that I enjoyed quite a bit. He's a great author, and I really enjoy his books. And this book is a pretty interesting book. This is about him traveling across America with his dog Charley, which is a poodle. Now, before I get into this book, I want to point out that I've read this book beforehand, On the Road by Jack Kerouac. And the thing about it is, I thought that book was going to be what this book is. I enjoyed this book a lot more than I enjoyed On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Kerouac. So, what this book is about John Steinbeck personally goes on a journey across America. And he kind of goes around the edges of America. He goes on the north, and then he goes around to California, and then he comes around through Texas to the south, and then he comes back again to New York. And the way that he does this, he actually has a truck. I believe he buys this truck for this journey, and he kind of builds a little house. Well, he doesn't build it, but he has a house built on the back of this pickup truck. So it's got a bed, it's got a place for him to keep his belongings for the trip, food and all that. So he builds this, gets this, the truck equipped with like a camper. It's like a camper truck now. And he actually gives it a name. He calls it Rosinante, which is the name of Don Quixote's horse. And he sets off on this journey across America. But before he goes on this journey, he goes into this part to where there's a hurricane about to hit. So he kind of explains what he has to go through to kind of save his boat and anchor his boat down. And he has a lot of trouble with this hurricane that happens. And he literally almost gets his boat destroyed, but his actions save his boat. And that's how this book starts, as this hurricane. So after this hurricane's over, he decides to set off on this journey, just him and his dog Charley. And, he goes off on this journey. And one of the first things he discovers when he's on this journey is that if he takes a garbage can, a plastic garbage can, and you fill it with water and soap, and you put clothing in the garbage can, it actually turns out to be a great washing machine. So he kind of invents his own little washing machine, and it's a pretty clever thing. And, a lot of this is him actually meeting people, and he invites a lot of people over to his Rosinante, and they have coffee with a little booze in it, and he invites several people to his um, little Rosa Canty, right? So also there's times he stops in like log cabins and he spends some times with people there. But yeah, he goes and there's not much that happens. There's just a bunch of conversations. Good conversations, but I mean, I can't really repeat the conversations. But he has some interesting conversations with people along the way. But then he gets to Chicago. When he gets to Chicago, he has his wife fly in to meet him, and he spends some time with her there in Chicago. But before she arrives, he goes to this hotel, and they don't have his room ready. So they let him in another person's room that just left. And when he goes in this room, he actually admits that he's nosy, and he goes through the room and he discovers a lot of things about the person that just left, and he kind of gives you some details of the things that he finds. Actually, there was a woman that met the guy that left before him at this hotel room, and it's pretty interesting. He's talking about the cigarettes in the ashtray and the little clues that were left, and it was kind of funny part of the book, and I got a kick out of that. That was pretty funny. Now, I might be placing this wrong, but there's a part to where he wants to go to Canada to see Niagara Falls. Now, this might have happened before he got to Chicago, but he tries to get in to Canada, but he can't get into Canada because his dog Charley does not have a shot. So he has to turn around, but I think he still gets to see Niagara Falls. And then a little bit later, he goes through other towns and meets other peoples. One thing he says about Montana, he really loved Montana a lot. When he gets to Montana, he says and how beautiful it is, and it's a little bit more beautiful than everything else. Other times when he's going through Chicago, he's complaining that he can't really look around. He's got to pay attention to traffic. But then he gets through those. After he goes through Montana, he goes over to Seattle, spends some time in Seattle and Oregon, and then he goes to California. And when he's in California, he's got some family members there and some old friends. When he meets up with his family, they kind of are arguing about politics, which is not a good idea. I wish that families would not argue about politics, but he's a Democratic person, and his family members are Republican, and they kind of argue with each other quite a bit. And then another interesting thing in California, you see the redwood trees, and he really describes on how impressive they are. And then another interesting thing, my favorite part of this whole story is when they go to Yosemite Park. And when they're in Yosemite Park, there's a park ranger that tells them that you got to be careful with your dog because there's a lot of bears there and the bears might kill your dog, so you better keep your dog in the truck. But he kind of goes and he doesn't really worry about it. But when Charley actually starts seeing these bears, he actually wants to attack these bears. He really starts growling and getting ready to attack these bears. And I thought this was a pretty interesting part because Charley wanted to kill these bears. And it was pretty interesting. So that was a pretty interesting thing. When he was in San Francisco, he hung out with some of his friends. And it was kind of interesting when he spent some time at this bar. And how people were complaining on how things were not as good as they were. And how a lot of the people he knew were no longer there. And then after he goes from California, he actually goes to Texas next. And when he's in Texas, he actually spends some time with some friends of his. And they kind of have a Thanksgiving party. So this book is kind of a Thanksgiving book. So you actually cover Thanksgiving, about them talking about the turkey farm they have and all that. And there's a party they have for Thanksgiving. Then he has a good time in Texas and with his friends, and then he moves on. But then we come to like the most tragic part of the story. Then we get to Louisiana, and this is where we have the most tragic part of this book. There's a tragic part of this book. It's kind of a little bit depressing. I mean, it's interesting, but it's like not my favorite part of this story. Is that when he gets to Louisiana, this is where you start seeing racism. Now you got to think that this book came out in 1962, and he took this trip in 1961. Now this is before Dr. Martin Luther King did the March on Washington. That was in 1963. This is before the assassination of John F. Kennedy. This is after Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was in like 1955. So, but racism was still popular in Louisiana at this time. So he actually starts seeing some racism. So, but there's this event that he goes to. And they're called cheerleaders. And what this event is when there's a little girl, Rudy Bridges. He doesn't say her name in this, but I believe this is Rudy Bridges. I looked this up in history. She is like the first black girl that actually goes to an all-white school in Louisiana. And when she goes, there is a crowd of people, so he witnesses this event firsthand. And when this girl goes to the school, she's getting verbally attacked by all the white people in the town. And it's actually really depressing that she had to go through this. You've got this little 6-year-old girl that just had to listen to all this stuff, and she had to be terrified. So in a way, it's kind of inspiring because she's a brave little girl. I mean, for her to go through this must have took a lot of effort because, you know, and she's only 6 years old. So you got to give it up for Rudy Bridges. She was really brave to do this. And John Steinbeck actually watches this event unfold, and he kind of describes this, and that's pretty much near the end of the book, and that's when he says his adventure is pretty much over, and then he just wants to go home after he experiences that. But before he actually goes home, he meets a couple people. He actually picks up a racist white guy that he winds up kicking out of his truck, and he also meets a couple black people that are terrified of him because he's a white guy. And I didn't expect this in this book, although it shouldn't be surprising because this was in 1960 and race relations were not the best until Dr. Martin Luther King actually did that March on Washington and got the civil rights passed. And that's when we really started healing as a nation. That was a really wonderful thing. But yeah, so there was still a lot of racial tensions at that point. So then he winds up just going home, and there's not much else in this book. But this was an interesting book. I'm glad that I actually spent the time to read this. This wasn't what I expected it to be, but at the same time, it was what I expected of On the Road by Jack Kerouac. So it was pretty interesting. I would recommend this book, although John Steinbeck's other books are a little bit better than this, but still, this is a book that I enjoyed reading, and I would recommend it. You know, it's if you're into a travelogue. So that's it. I am Peter the Booklover. I want to thank you. So if you like the video, please do me a favor. Hit the like button. It means a lot to me. If you hit the like button, those like buttons mean a lot to the people that make videos, so please hit the like button if you enjoy the content. Now, I also love comments, so please do me a favor. Let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear from you. My favorite part of doing this is communicating with the audience, so please let me know what you think in the comments. I would love that. And if you subscribe to my channel, I really want to thank you for subscribing. It means a lot to me. But if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do me a favor. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell. I make new videos all the time, so if you subscribe to my channel, I will provide more content in the future. And I'm really working on making these videos the best that I can. And that's about it. I am Peter the Book Lover. I want to thank you for coming by, and I hope to see you in the next video.